Hey everybody, this is Zachary Mars, founder of indie game studio Finn's Fables, and this is my presentation on how the game industry uses descriptive analytics. There's four basic types of analytics, including descriptive, diagnostic, prescriptive, and predictive. Predictive tries to predict what will happen. Prescriptive tries to give an answer to a problem. Diagnostic tries to answer the question, why did this happen? And descriptive, the subject of this presentation, basically says, what happened? It's the most simple type of diagnostic and kind of covers the most basic information. So what do big game companies like ArenaNet, Riot Games, Epic Games, or Blizzard use descriptive analytics for? Well, one of the main reasons is user acquisition. Data-driven game companies build communities and personalize for their players. So what does that mean? Well, in 2023, game advertisers spent nearly $30 billion just on trying to acquire new users. With the cost of user acquisition rising, these game companies increasingly rely on creating communities and player spaces where players feel valued and rewarded for their contribution to the game. Modern free-to-play games are based on their development on metrics, and with the ultimate goal of getting as many users as possible and also maximizing the lifetime of userhood. And ultimately, the difference between two games that look very much alike but are significantly different from one another, or even not significantly different from one another, games that are very similar, but one is very successful and one isn't. Typically, the difference is descriptive analytics and a proper market segmentation, knowing how to appeal to their customers and make custom experiences for those users. So yeah, that's the first use is user acquisition. The next point goes kind of hand in hand with that. And that player life cycle we talked about is player retention. There's four key metrics here that I've laid out. Well, the last one's not really a metric, but anyway, the first three here are metrics that they use in the game industry to measure how well players are, liking your game. The first is retention rate, which is the rate at which new players come back and return to your game. The next here is stickiness rate, and that's the rate which your existing users, so users who have been coming back to your game for a while, who've historically played your game, so that's that descriptive data, right? You already know what these users have done. That's the rate at which they come back and play your game. And so they look at this data. They look at retention rate, they look at stickiness rate, and another important metric as it relates to those is called the sustained visit rate. So if like on an online game, if a user only logs in for like 30 seconds or a minute and a half compared to 5 minutes, well, they're less likely to subscribe to the game and come back to them and be retained players and be part of that stickiness rate and retention rate, because that the sustained visit, if they don't engage with the game long enough, they won't like to play. So game developers can use that kind of data to make decisions like, let's leave it out of prescriptive, but that it can help them get a feel for how players are engaging with their game. And that ultimately can help them decide the product market fit, which is how much of do players really want to play their game? How much does their product answer a market need or a question in the market? How much does it fit the wants of actual players? So all of these go into determining product market fit for game companies. And the figures and metrics here from this slide are all based off of Meta's team. They have a game called Horizon World. And a game, I think it's called Horizon, but they have a game called Horizon and Meta, and that's where they got all these numbers for the retention rate and the stickiness rate. And they also give their calculations there. So in addition to keeping and retaining new players, which is obviously a key part of making money and selling games, they also make better games, better quests, and custom individualized game experiences. Blizzard Entertainment, in particular, uses historic player data and performs analysis on it to come up with new personalized quests, challenges, new play styles. This, maybe really even could be considered kind of branching into more like prescriptive, diagnostics, things that they can do to adjust for the players. But they end up analyzing this historic data, and it starts with descriptive analysis of the player data. Similarly, EA's matchmaking system uses historic player data and descriptive analytics, more in the form of an algorithm, to ensure fair and competitive play, to make sure that players are happier, which builds a better game community, which makes players happier also and increases game engagement. So another use of descriptive analytics is to compare elements of a game and balance them out. A classic example of this is in Riot Games using descriptive analytics. They built in analytic systems into the actual game itself, into League of Legends. Then they also send out regular surveys to their players. And by collecting all this data and performing analysis on how the players press buttons and interact with the game, what's called telemetry, they can figure out things like who's having troubles mastering different characters? Are characters' moves well balanced for each other? Are certain moves not being used that if they're not, maybe they can be revisited? Things like that. So it's better understanding their player bases. They can better understand their champions, and ultimately getting into the prescriptive side, they can, once they've performed analysis of their descriptive nature, they can use it to come up with changes for the games and do more of that diagnostic and prescriptive analysis. Monetization. So getting into money-making reasons, one of the key reasons they use descriptive diagnostics is to help identify profitable players. This is particularly the developer King, which made Candy Crush. They target players who are more likely to spend on their app and focus marketing efforts in that direction. EA, I mentioned they had a matchmaking algorithm that optimizes player experience and also difficulty balancing. But in addition to that, they actually patented an algorithm for matchmaking that can optimize spending on microtransactions. A lot of people, there's some questions here about how manipulative that is. However, this is something big game companies like EA and Activision have done to try to encourage player spending. Perhaps more powerful than this is data-driven strategies for identifying customers' buying behaviors. You can use historical data to look at things and figure out, what do players like, what do your players like, and what did they do before? What things have they bought in the past? Have they historically liked free trials of games, for example, or have they liked if they get a free trial, do they want bonus features? If they get a game, do they want it to come with a map or some custom art features? Things like that. And another important aspect of protecting revenue and monetization is being able to detect fraudulent transactions in online games. They can use descriptive analytics to find patterns and anomalies in players' behaviors, things like hacking and transaction fraud, and use that to mitigate damage both to their bottom line in actual profits and also into their game's reputation. You can also improve level design using spatial analytics. By collecting player data from making heat maps, you can find pathways that players are more likely to take and things that might frustrate players and get them to quit the game. And you can fix things like that and improve your level of design. Finally, descriptive analytics have actually been used in several games as a game feature. Here you can see the game Dispatch by Ad Hoc Studios, which has kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure game of sorts that follows a superhero who's dispatching a team of reformed villains. And as a game feature, it allowed you to see at the end of any level how your decisions compared to other historic data and how other players played the game. And that would give you kind of a fun thing to compare, did I do very well compared to other players? How many players did as poorly as I did? How many players decided to romance this character or decided to romance no character? Things like that. And so by making it a part of the player experience, video games actually can use descriptive analytics as a player-facing tool. Thanks for listening to my presentation.